pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Meeting of the Dalton City Council's order. Mr. Wall will lead us in the pledge.
Surely we're not going to have that echo.
Hello, 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 hello.
The agenda is before you. Do we have any additions, deletions, corrections? There a motion we approve it?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Harlan, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Wall. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, like sign. Next, under public commentary, I'm going to read this again so I can make it official. The input we receive from the community is valued by mayor and council. We simply ask that you complete the information card available at the back table near the entrance and give that to the city clerk when you approach to speak. We'll use the information to correctly note your name in the record, and in case we need to follow up to answer a question or provide information in response to your comments. Anybody with public comments? Doesn't look like it. Next, the minutes are before you of the last mayor and council meeting of July 20th, 2020. Any corrections, deletions, additions? There a motion we approve the minutes?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Wall, second by Ms. Harlan. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Under unfinished business, there's the second reading on ordinance 20-11, amendment to unified zoning ordinance to create clearer definitions, make inserts or omissions, and otherwise improve the context and readability of the zoning text. Proposed amendments will affect group homes, personal care homes, and boutique hotels, but other definitions and permitted uses may also be added, amended in this process. Andy? No, you are, I'm sorry. Yep.
I think what I would do is propose the question before I go through this, obviously, line item by line item. There's a lot of information. Would y'all rather me go through number by number or just answer any questions that y'all might have?
Just explain again how it affects the group homes.
Yes, sir. The group homes are essentially what we started with. We understood we need to look back into that our definitions may not be perfectly accurate, and we may need to readdress some things as far as density and where certain types of uses are allowed based on the impact that they may have on certain types of neighborhoods, just from a characteristic standpoint, density and so forth. And so when we embarked on that, initially worked with the Area Agency on Aging and worked with the Georgia Department of Community Health and Family and Child Protective Services was part of that as well. And basically what we found was a lot of our definitions were not inaccurate necessarily. We just needed to update things like the state entity that's presides over the licensing. Most of these uses that you'll see in these definitions require state licensure to operate, whether they're a small private entity or a larger entity like some of these definitions towards the end. And of course, things like an assisted living facility, those are obviously a more intensive style use, more density, and of course require that licensure. So we wanted to make sure that we went in and corrected those, get the right definitions to be accurate and parallel with what the state has and defines these uses as well as the licensing authority, so that we can keep those things parallel. And that helps us as an administration, because there are instances, more than you would think, of where individuals are operating certain types of quote unquote group homes or community living arrangements, they're number 3, illegally. They're not licensed, and individuals in some cases are being taken advantage of in one way or another. So as a zoning administrator or administration, we're able to detect those types of things, and we can actually look these things up and determine through that department whether or not that entity has a license, has applied for a license, so on and so forth. So that helps us in that regard. And of course, if they're unlicensed, then they're operating illegally, and the state will obviously come in and address that. So that was one benefit of going through this, is making some of those connections with some of those state departments. And some of the new definitions here that we didn't necessarily have before are number 3, community living arrangement. And we go towards the back, there's one that is group home itself. We basically worked that definition down parallel with what the state's definition is. I think prior to that, our group home definition kind of shoehorned a lot of different things into. So we were able to take those out, break that up where it's appropriate, and make sure that we address each one of these types of units independently. And then in the green highlight, you can see where we've recommended zone districts. And what we've done there, like in the, I think the most easiest to explain is the last one, number 9, personal care home. And basically we just created tiers of density as to how many individuals are being cared for as a part of that operation. And that lets us know what kind of building is going to be required. Is it something that can fit in with a single family neighborhood, or is it something that is entirely unlike a single family neighborhood? And so that's where we were able to look at our zone districts from anywhere from agriculture to mixed use and planned unit development, try to make sure that we got the right definition and of course the right zone district for that benefit. And we had no opposition at the public hearing, and the Planning Commission did vote unanimously to approve. There were some questions, I believe by one of the county commissioners, as to what effect this might have on existing entities that of course are licensed and legally in operation. And the answer to that was the specific ones that we looked up in question were already going to be in a conforming environment. They had the right zone district and so forth to operate. In the event that there's an issue somewhere else that doesn't have the right zoning and there's an entity in operation, they of course, like any other use, would be considered non-conforming, and that means they're grandfathered in and they can continue operating. If they seek an expansion or something like that, or cease that use for a period of more than 12 months, then they simply can come back and request a rezoning. And otherwise they can continue to operate indefinitely. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of Ethan? There a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Harlan, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Wall. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Under new business number 3, audit engagement letter for independent annual financial audit.
Yes, Mayor Pennington, this is our standard audit engagement letter for our independent audit. And it just lays out the scope of services that they do for us. And it's just, do you have any questions or?
Questions? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Wall, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Goodlett. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Under CDBG subrecipient agreements with Northwest Georgia Family Crisis Center, Friendship House, City of Refuge, and Dalton Housing Authority.
Yes, Mayor Pennington, these are just our subrecipient agreements that the boards have turned back into us for signatures, and the funds are there. We just need to get these signed and back so that they can start drawing down their funding.
These are the same ones we looked at before.
Yeah, you've already approved them.
Okay.
This is just looking at the agreement and approving the agreements that are in there.
There a
for your
motion on this?
signature.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Harlan, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Wall. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Number 5, dedication of public right-of-way, the farm subdivision. Andrew?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For your consideration, City Council is a resolution to accept and publicly dedicate the right-of-ways within the farm subdivision from the Mill Creek Property Owners Association. There are 9 streets within the subdivision which total 3.6 centerline miles. Upon acceptance, these streets would become publicly owned and maintained. The city already provides curbside garbage and recycling collection on those streets today, and this request comes from the Homeowners Association. Be glad to answer any questions.
Is there a reason why one of the streets didn't get put into this? Why did they want to keep one private? Was there any specific reason?
There was one street, South Wildberry Lane, that was excluded because it was never platted as a right-of-way. It was always platted as a private easement to serve 4 homes, and the association never took ownership of that particular right-of-way or that easement.
So you would never touch that street, is
We
that?
would not own or maintain that one street.
Currently, those trash cans are, we don't access that to pick up trash either, correct?
No, I don't think so. There's only 4 homes that sit way off the road.
Get brought all
They
the
get
way-
brought up to Wildberry, which is, would be a public street.
Excuse me, also, Andrew, as I understand, these streets meet all the standards that the city would require to be brought into an area. I know we've had requests before, but the streets didn't meet the qualifications to actually be up to standard.
In this particular case, most of the roads are built pretty close to city standards. About half of them do not have curb and gutter, but there's a lot of city streets that don't have curb and gutter. But as far as the thicknesses and the cul-de-sacs, all of that is built to city standard. There's enough room for us already to operate large garbage trucks. We're the heaviest trucks on those streets already. And there's very little degradation out there today. So they're pretty well built in conformance with city standards.
Is all the, I guess, security and gates being removed to make it automatically public, or when will that go into effect?
So there's no gates. There is a guard shack. The homeowners association attorney, in the most recent deed that's put before the council, excluded the property where the guard shack sits. So that would be included. And I think in our review of state law, as long as there's no gate, it should be okay.
So he don't,
correct?
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's correct, Andrew. Once it becomes a public street through the dedication process, it has to be accessible to the public. You can't have any type of gate or
But do he have the right to stop cars, or no?
There's no language in the state statute regarding guard shacks. There's no instruction source from state law as to that issue. So the guard shack, under the proposal of the homeowner association, the guard shack would remain on their property. They would own that property. The city would simply own the paving that goes around that guard shack.
I'm just saying, like, if I was drive through there and say he tried to tell me to stop and I don't stop, is that illegal? If I kept going?
The city would have public access.
Okay.
You can't be prevented entering those streets if and when it's accepted by the city. The resolution I did prepare would normally go into effect immediately. Resolutions of the mayor and council, this one would go into effect immediately and upon the actual deed being filed with the clerk's office. So there is a second step to this. The homeowners association has to execute a deed, actually dedicating the property and granting it to the city of Dalton. Once that's filed with the clerk, then it would be effective and be a public street. Assuming that would take place within the next few days, since the project, homeowners association.
I have a follow-up question to the guard shack. It's my understanding that currently that guard shack often does not make an effort to go out and stop someone. It's more to make themselves available if there's a question to be asked, because there's often banquets and social functions of that nature that are held at the clubhouse. And so it's to be there is to be of a help, not to be there to question what is someone doing, because they have no mechanism by which to stop someone. But several years ago, and this may still be the case, there are photographs taken of every license plate that goes through. So if there were to be an issue, they would have a record of who had entered and accessed that property in a vehicle, because they had had some break-ins and some things. But it also kept, if they had an absenteeism, there was no one occupying the guard shack, they'd still have a record of who's entering and exiting. But it might be prudent to notify the homeowners association that they cannot restrict from somebody from entering. They can stop and ask a question to say, may you tell me, which way to get here or there? And that's supposed to be the spirit, as I understand it, of why there is a person in that guard shack. But I do think it would be the right thing to do is to notify the homeowners association along with this, is that, they cannot restrict from someone from driving onto the property, entering.
If mayor and council approves the resolution and in your direction, I guess letter to homeowners association, and we provide them a copy of
It's just my understanding when that camera system got put up, it became more common for somebody to come out and inquire as, you know, what's going on. It became more of a, may I help you? Do you have a question? So,
Can they ever be private again?
Pardon, I didn't hear.
Can the streets ever be since they still have a private street in there, can these streets ever become private again?
It would require another action by the city council, I would think. Is that correct, Gandy?
so the street that's excluded, it's more of a driveway. I mean, if they're
It's
bringing
correct.
their
It was never platted as a right of way, where the other 9 streets in review of the plats, they were all platted as 50-foot right of ways. That street was always platted as an easement. So there was a distinct difference even in the original survey work that was to be a private easement.
And what's your cost on this now?
The cost is the initial cost of repair of a couple of items. They've got a couple of failed corrugated metal pipes and a couple of asphalt patches that need to occur that are pretty routine maintenance type items for city streets. The cost to repair those is $55,000 using internal forces at Public Works. And then the overall cost of adding these streets to our city street network is about $45,000 per year. How we came up with that figure is we looked at what it would cost to resurface every street in the subdivision once during a 20-year period. We annualized that cost over 20 years. And so it's, I think the overall number is 800,000, a little bit over 800,000. When you annualize that, it's just over 40,000. And our liability for the city streets is 180 centerline miles is what we maintain right now. That liability each year is about 1.8 million. So you would be adding 45,000 a year to that 1.8 million in liability. That's for perpetual maintenance.
Two more. And how will this affect like the ongoing projects that you already have? Will it?
So in terms of ongoing projects, our street division is currently working on New Dora Street, a street improvements project where we're putting in curb and gutter, tying the driveways in, getting rid of some open ditches. We'll continue to pursue that project, but I do have a stormwater maintenance division that would probably be deployed to take care of some of the immediate needs because they're not tied up on an active project. They're working on just normal troubleshooting calls right now. But it would be built into our overall work schedule. It would not move immediately to the front of the line.
And I guess my last one was this like an emergency? Like, cause usually, you know, most of all this stuff usually come up a couple of times at the Public Works Committee. You know, was it like, I mean, it came up, what, a year or two ago, and we said no because they were still private.
I think the homeowners association has been trying to determine the best approach, what they wanted to do, because they have had some maintenance issues over a period of time that they've been paying for to repair themselves. And they approached, as you mentioned, probably 6 or 8 months ago, the city about doing some repairs in there. Like I said, pretty routine stuff like catch basin tops that fail over time. And since then, they've been trying to evaluate what they want to do. And today they have reached the point they've made the request to bring it into the city street network, the 3.6 centerline miles.
Also, Andrew, as I understand this helps us with a couple of easement issues.
Well, it certainly clears things up for Dalton Utilities. They are the water and sewer provider and OptiLink provider to the farm. And during the deed research, we found out that they did not actually have a utility easement in the subdivision, according to their attorney. So if the council accepts this right-of-way dedication, Dalton Utilities takes title in the city of Dalton's name. And therefore, that would clear that up for Dalton Utilities because they actually have a water tank and everything over there. Any further questions?
Any other questions? Your motion on this?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Cruz, is there a second? Second by Mr. Wall. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign.
Aye.
Number 6, traffic control change one-way street for North Hamilton Street between Springdale Road and Ogburn Street.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the June Public Works Committee meeting, a concern was brought forth about the area of North Hamilton Street between Springdale Road and Ogburn Street. If you're familiar with that area up in North Hamilton, North Dalton area, you'll be familiar with the fact that you don't typically stay on North Hamilton to go all the way to Springdale. You cut over on Lamar Street and then back over to Springdale. The primary concerns were the narrow width of pavement and a vertical cresting curve that limits sight distance. So our traffic division conducted a study and determined that 53% of the vehicles on this segment of North Hamilton were traveling southbound. Therefore, at the last Public Works Committee meeting, the committee elected to recommend to the full council that North Hamilton Street be converted to one-way southbound from Springdale to Ogburn Street. And I will say that Public Works sent out letters to the affected property owners, and 3 out of 9 responded, and those were all in favor of the changes. The other 6 did not respond. We feel like it will improve safety and driver expectation to make that one small section of North Hamilton Street one way.
Any questions of Andrew? There a motion on that?
I make the motion and just want to let everyone know that this did come through the Public Works Committee and had a full recommendation.
Say that again.
That's my motion.
What?
Motion, and that it did come before the Public Works Committee, and we did have a full recommendation to make that a one-way street.
Motion by Mr. Goodler, is there a second? Second by Ms. Harding. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Number 7, contract with Geostabilization International for emergency above-road stabilization repair of Dugout Battle Road.
Okay, as you might recall, during the Easter weekend, the city was inundated with rainfall that caused flooding and some slope failures in town. That was the same system that brought the tornadoes to Murray County. The most significant slope failure for us occurred on Dugout Battle between the Convention Center and Battlefield Parkway on a 60-foot cut slope, probably one of the taller cut slopes on that road. Since the failure occurred, our staff has been working behind the scenes to identify the recommended repair plan. There were several alternatives considered. And as part of this review, we brought in subject matter experts from different sectors of this particular subject matter, including geotechnical engineers, contractors, and a geologist from GDOT. The repair plan recommended involves installing soil nail anchors deep into the earth with a high-strength steel mesh facing. You've probably seen that on some mountainous roads if you go to the Smokies or something like that. This is a common repair treatment for these type issues. We're seeking emergency procurement approval of a contract with GSI to perform the work, but to facilitate this work, we will have a separate contract with a grading contractor, Northwest Georgia Paving, to install 3 working benches into the slope to facilitate GSI being able to install the soil nail anchors with their equipment. The GSI contract is a unit price contract with an anticipated total cost of $491,008. We have submitted a request to GDOT for additional LMIG funding since it's emergency repair. And the latest update on that is that the local aid meeting got postponed until August the 12th. So we're still not totally sure whether or not we'll be a recipient of that. But the indications that I've received is that we should hopefully be in line for at least partial funding for the project. But I'm making that clear in case we don't get any funding. The work is scheduled to take place and be complete within 60 days. And just so that everybody knows, there will be some intermittent road closures while certain operations of the work will be performed, like timber clearing. But our goal is to leave at least a single lane open at all times as much as possible, because we did receive a lot of public feedback about trying to leave a lane open. I'd be glad to answer any questions. That's the first contract of 2 that I'll be presenting on.
Go ahead and
this.
do 8 too, because they go together.
Okay, so as I previously mentioned, GSI's specialty is really the soil nail anchor part. So we're working with a local grading contractor, Northwest Georgia Paving, who you might recall repaired the Botany Woods slope failure we had in the spring of last year. So they have extensive experience with us in this type work. The contract with them will be structured with hourly equipment and operator rates with a not to exceed price of $213,979,000. And they'll also be performing some of the specialty hydro seeding on the final slope face. And I will say that in an effort to minimize cost to the city, as you can see, this is already a costly repair. Public Works will be performing some of the work in-house, like hauling the timber out, hauling dirt in, hauling rock in, and will also be helping with traffic control to try to minimize cost.
That reflected in their in their price, or?
Yes, it would have been substantially more if we would have not helped in those two phases.
And just for edification, because when we get into all this, frankly, it's beyond my pay grade. What's the worst thing that can happen if something like this is not taken care of right now?
The worst case scenario, and what we were really nervous about at first, is whether the slope failure continued further underneath the road, because that's what happens a lot of time. That plane of failure can actually continue under the road and we could have lost the road. As things stand right now, there does not appear to be any subsurface failure going on. There was no physical signs of cracking. That's what all the experts looked at. The reason it has taken us some time to get to this point is because we didn't want to leave any stone unturned. That was my goal, because the repair is so costly. But in consultation with these subject matter experts that were independent, like a GDOT geologist, they basically told us we only had the one option in terms of a treatment.
And you say GDOT is meeting on the 12th?
That's correct.
What they can do with this.
And I will say our local delegation of state representatives and senators have made it clear to GDOT that this is definitely a priority for the local area, because we certainly didn't budget, $750,000 expense in the city budget. So hopefully we'll be successful in that grant.
The question is, Andrew, let's take 7 and 8 together, because the contracts really go together, do they not? Their motion to approve 7 and 8. Motion by Ms. Harlan, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Goodlett. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Number 9, new records management software to replace existing software.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. This is the contract you have before you is in a response to a RFP that we released earlier in the year to replace our current records management system that's we're utilizing at the fire department. The current system was bought out about approximately 5 years ago by ESO, and they have been dismantling that program since then. And so through loss of data and various things, we see the need to move to a different emergency reporting system. Earlier in the year, we released the RFP. We reduced the list down to those that submitted RFPs to 4 from 6. One was disqualified due to the price difference. The other one did not follow a bid procedure. After reviewing the 4 bids that came in, we have decided on emergency reporting, which is the contract you have before you. The initial setup and first year cost of that is $8,590. In comparison, our current annual cost of Firehouse is $5,744. The annual cost of emergency reporting is actually a savings for a better program at $3,840. We will be able to realize an annual savings of $1,904 through that, as well as some of the other modules that would be piggyback on and later on in 2021. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. If not, I'd ask approval for that contract.
Questions of the chief? There a motion we approve this? Motion by Ms. Harlan, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Wall. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Is there any other supplemental business before this body?
I do have a quick question on that fire study that we approved. Since the county decided not to participate, where do we stand on that now?
Just dies.
Okay. Thank you.
There a motion we adjourn? We are adjourned. I
agree, my friend is sharp.